nonsense, the center, with your host, DC Radical One.
Greetings, Black family, and welcome to On the Wake Up Radio. I am your host, DC Radical One, and you have entered the center. Shout out to our wonderful producer, Cindy Ashby. You can check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and iHeartRadio at On the Wake Up Radio. More important than that, you can check us out at onthewakeupradio.com. That's onthewakeupradio.com. In tonight's discussion, well, first of all, doing something that I've never done before. We're live streaming to Instagram and YouTube simultaneously. So hopefully the tech stuff works. We'll see how that goes. Second of all, we're talking about something that will probably cause the channel or the Instagram to get shut down, or at least this will probably get deleted. While I set up the music, y'all let me know if that's too loud. Y'all know I do music for most shows. So tonight's discussion, we're going to talk about, is the next pandemic on the horizon. Now, this is not conspiracy theory. Oh, hold up. Before I even get started, hold up. Let me greet the people. My bad. No disrespect intended. BB48 Straight Black Pride to Straight Black Star. BB48 the Straight Black Pride to Sister Nina. And a BB48 to Brother Kevin. Now, here's the interesting thing. Now, this could be a coincidence or not, but weirdly enough, I have more likes on the video than apparently have people in the stream on the YouTube side, even though I saw more people on the stream before I actually hit go live than I do now. So that's interesting. So I'm not sure if it's because this is not a night I normally stream, or if this is one of those things where they don't want people to see. So, nonetheless, we're going to do what we do. We're going to go through this discussion tonight on the next pandemic, as well as the WHO treaty and Astrazeneca revelation. We're going to tie all these things into a nice, neat bow, connecting them with the war in Ukraine. Now, I'm sure somebody heard that and like, wait, how in the world are you going to connect all those things? Well, if you have watched The Center before, you know that we have connected the dots on many things that seem like they were not connected at all. But one thing I do need y'all to do, just want to make sure you can hear me. So you can hear me, please put a 1 in the chat on the YouTube side. And also, okay. And the brother said I'm coming through clear on the Instagram side. So I need to do that. All right. Thank you, brother. Music not too loud. So, oh, by the way, I forgot. Let me make this announcement as well. This is a new month. So this month, connected to the presentation I'm going to make tonight, what I am going to do is anyone who donates $20 or more this month, it happens to be my birthday month, by the way, but we're nowhere near it. Basically at the end of the month. So So you will get this sent to you because this probably is not going to stay up. And you will get the lectures about C19 that I did in, I believe it was 2020, that no one has seen. I'm about to work on those, edit those, and I will send those out. So those are our lectures for the month. Also, if you prefer, or for our long time subscribers who send money basically every month, you will get those in addition to the Dr. Chancellor William gravesite celebrations that we have done over the last, I believe, 4 years. I know I have at least 3, maybe 4. So those will be given out. Those will be sent out like the 2019 Dr. Collins lecture was sent out. And if anybody hasn't seen that or they hadn't received that and you would like to get the Dr. Collins 2019 Dr. Collins lecture, which I highly recommend, as I do a little shameless plug, you can check that out as well. Now that we are through with the preliminaries, let's get into the discussion. So, I don't know how many people have heard of disease X, but I heard the World Health Organization current president, Ethiopian, Mr. Theodros. Can't remember his full name now, but as we bring the articles up, I'm sure his name is in there. And he was speaking about disease X. And disease X is this unknown contagion that they are expecting to eventually make its way to the stage, the world stage, they're expecting it to affect the world and to be even deadlier and spread just as fast as C19. Now, I know we tend to forget, but C19 did change the world and the landscape. So, the first thing I'm doing, I'm going to go through the article on what is disease X. After I do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go back in time and look at some things that happened in the past and compare them to now and see, are we in for a replay of what occurred in 2019 and 2020. Also, we will look at the WHO pandemic treaty, which is up for discussion, and connect the dot between those two things. Right? So, let me do something real quick. Get that out the way. And now, let's get to this article. It says, this is from New Scientist. It says, what is disease X? It says, don't panic. Disease X doesn't exist yet, but it might one day. Disease X is the label that the World Health Organization uses to refer to some currently unknown infectious condition that is capable of causing an epidemic, or if it spreads across multiple countries, a pandemic. The term, coined in 2017, that's important. We're going to bring up a video to show why that year is important, can be used to mean a newly discovered pathogen or any known pathogen with newly acquired pandemic potential. By the latter definition, COVID-19 was the first disease X. Again, it's not me making this up. I'm not pulling this out of thin air. We see this is from the New Scientist. Let us read. The World Health Organization has been warning global leaders about the risk of future pandemics at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting. Stop right there. As we see here now, we see a clear connection between the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. If you have been following my work for the last 4 years, I probably have done as much on the World Economic Forum as any Black person out here, as far as talking about their formation, history, agenda, principles, what they're trying to do. I recommend you go to my YouTube video, The Great Reset, Myth or Reality. That'll give you a basic understanding of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, right? Now, says, some people say this may create panic, says WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus. Sorry, I'm butchering the man's name. Hey, it is what it is. No, it's better to anticipate something that may happen because it happened in our history many times and prepare for it. Now let's stop right here. That sounds good in theory, right? It's better to be prepared than not. I mean, that makes perfect sense when you say it. But here's the problem. As we'll see, and I'll show, because documentation beats conversation, they were quote unquote prepared because they've been talking about this since 2017. They did a tabletop exercise for something that looked eerily similar to what became known as COVID in 2019. And then COVID happened in 2020. And yet everyone was unprepared, right? So warning people about this mysterious disease that's not yet here in advance didn't work the first time. Unless you consider that the goal was not to stop the disease from coming, but to implement the cure, right? So it all depends on what your wow, it says I reached my article limit. I just had this whole thing up. Now, because I read through it. One of the things they discuss is what the next disease X might be, right? And they go through all types of disease. They say that's possible that it's something new. They say something they've never seen before. Or a pathogen that is known but acquires a different form. It mutates so that it may not be as infectious before, but then it becomes more infectious. Or it may only infect animals, but then it begins to infect humans. Or it may have been very deadly before, and it's not as deadly, but it spreads further. Or it's more something that is more deadly and doesn't spread as far. Like, these are the things that happen. Now, for a long time, I believe that this was naturally occurring. And it may be. But I will show in a video later on that many times these things are not naturally occurring. They're occurring because scientists are working to make these things happen, right? Now, somebody out there is going to say, now, come on, brother. Why in the world would anyone try to make a pathogen more deadly? That doesn't make any sense. That would be insane. Why would anyone do that? I know that's what someone is thinking. And it makes perfect sense, right? But again, I'm still a line from Brother James. I can show you better than I can tell you. So what I want to do is, I'm going to look at this first video. And because now I want to go back in time, because we have the framework for the whole Disease X discussion, very basic framework, right? Before they straight Black Pride to Sister Vanessa. I want to go back to 2017 because they mentioned 2017 in this article, and I want to show Mr. Anthony Fauci, someone we haven't seen in a while, someone that we might have forgotten existed, right? If it was up to the media. And I want to show you what he said in 2017 so we can understand how things went, because we've forgotten. And then it's going to be real interesting as we move forward. So what I'm going to do, pause our music, and we're going to load up this clip.
A surprise outbreak. Given, as you heard from the introduction, that I have been around for a while and have had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations, I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. And I hope by the end of my relatively short presentation, you will understand why history, the history of the last 32 years that I've been the director of NIAID, will tell the next administration that there's no doubt in anyone's mind that they will be faced with the challenges that their predecessors were faced with. So for those who think that infectious diseases is gone, there's so many people who've made foolhardy statements not knowing at the time that they made them. I usually show a quote from an old Surgeon General or an old pundit in infectious disease. So I thought I'd pull this one out from Sir Macfarlane Burnet, who was actually a Nobel Prize winning immunologist, who made the statement, as many did, to write about infectious diseases is almost to write of something that has passed into history. The most likely forecast about the future of infectious diseases is that it will be very dull, which is really kind of interesting coming from a semi-genius like Macfarlane Burnet. And I think what he did, and the mistake that so many people have made, is something that several of our panelists have already referred to. And that is a failure to look beyond our own borders in the issue of the globality of health issues. Not only things that are there that will come here, but surprises that we have. What are the lessons that we learned from HIV? One, you have to commit substantial financial and human resources. These things don't get addressed spontaneously by themselves. You have to enlist the best and the brightest investigators in both basic and clinical research. You have to involve the community, be it the gay community in the United States or the community in Africa and West Africa when we dealt with Ebola, or the people in South America when we're dealing with Zika. You have to have cross-sector collaboration. You can't do it alone. The CDC can't do it alone. The NIH can't do it alone. You do it with all of us, with industry, with global organizations, with philanthropy and NGOs, and you gotta get the leaders and the policymakers involved. What is for sure, that no matter what, history has told us definitively that it will happen, because infectious diseases, as I said 8 years ago in this article with David Morans and Greg Folkers, that it is a perpetual challenge. It is not going to go away. So the thing we're extraordinarily confident about is that we are going to see this in the next few years. Thank you.
Now, here's the thing about that, right? That was 2017. The thing that I noticed years ago when I saw that is that He said that the incoming administration, because that was January, this was right around the time Trump was coming to office, is guaranteed to see a pandemic. Now let's stop right there. Let's think about this now. Mr. Trump could have died in those 3 years, right? Mr. Trump could have been impeached in those 3 years. Mr. Trump could have, we could have gone to war, right? A lot of things could have happened. But Mr. Fauci said definitively this incoming administration will see a challenge from a pandemic. Now we have to ask ourselves one or two things. Either Mr. Fauci is a soothsayer and can see the future, or what's the other logical conclusion? I'm not even going to say it. I'm gonna let you all say it. There's only two conclusions here. Either Mr. Fauci is definitively a soothsayer and knew within 4 years that a major pandemic would affect the presidency of Donald Trump, or answer B, right? Y'all can answer what answer B is in the chat. Greetings to Sister Neff. Now, Sister Nina asked an important question. She said, so disease X doesn't exist yet. So they're working on it. Look, I'm not going to say they're working on it. We're just going to say that we're just going to look at the evidence. Again, documentation defeats conversation. I'm not telling you anything. I'm going to present the facts. We're going to weigh the preponderance of the evidence, and then we're going to come to a conclusion, right? Because plans do change. Maybe they change their mind. But what I'm going to show is that 2024 is starting to look mighty similar to 2020, right? Now, what else is also going on in this arena? What did Mr. Fauci say? Mr. Fauci said that we can't do it alone. You have to engage world leaders. You have to engage businesses. You have to engage the local populace, and so forth and so on. Now, before 2020, that wouldn't have made sense. Like, why you need all those people? You just need people who are experts in health. Now that we've experienced 2020, you're like, oh, okay, I see why. Here's the question we have to ask. What group of people are already have all these different people that he named lined up and working together? Who can bring all these people together? Again, if you understand the World Economic Forum, and you ever heard of Davos, you understand every year the World Economic Forum convenes a meeting. At that meeting, they bring the world leaders and the leaders in different fields of science and technology, disease prevention, all these experts, even entertainers, right? Now you're going to ask me, why entertainers? Because entertainers are what they call thought leaders, right? So you give the message to the entertainers give the message to the people. Entertainers have been incorporated into this system. And we saw that again in 2020. Remember, we saw all the people, the Hollywood people come up and start saying that, make sure you take your jab and make sure you wear your mask and the 6 feet of distance and all the things we had to go through, right? In 2020, they enlisted entertainers to help amplify those messages, right? So again, that's why I say go back to Great Reset, Myth or Reality and you get an understanding of the World Economic Forum, and then we'll soon see the connection between the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, right? And of course, there's already a connection between the World Health Organization and the UN, which means there's a connection between the World Economic Forum, United Nations, and the WHO. This is not conspiracy theory. These, what I call extra national organizations, work together. You see what I'm saying? This is how it works. So what we're going to look at is and understand what we saw in 2020 is that these extra national organization, right, are now reaching for a level of power that is that can limit the sovereignty of individual nations. That is the discussion on the horizon. And this is what the people, right, wherever you are, doesn't matter what country you're in, the people in America, the people in South Africa, the people in Angola, the people in Jamaica, the people in England, it doesn't matter where you are. This issue, as we saw with the pandemic, affects everyone. When the World Health Organization recommends shutting down of your government and limiting your resources because of the World Economic Forum, the chances are your government is going to do these things. You see what I'm saying? So this is why I am on here to tell you that the chances of this occurring are increasing literally as I'm speaking. Right now, let's go to the next article. Says talks on global pandemic agreement are in a race against time. And that is the World Health Organization building. Now it says Geneva, countries trying to negotiate a new global agreement on combating future pandemics began bridging their differences Monday, but they're racing against time to seal a deal. The 194 nations in the World Health Organization are back at its Geneva headquarters for one last round of negotiations. After a 2-year effort to secure a landmark accord on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response overran last month's deadline. Issued with a new slimmed down draft text that kicks some of the tougher topics down the road, countries began going through its 37 articles in turn. Now let's stop right here. Why were they forced to kick some of the tougher topics down the road? The reason is simple. When people began to see some of the issues and some of the ceding of their country's sovereignty to the World Health Organization, which means to the UN, which means to the World Economic Forum, because they're three legs of the same table, three tentacles of the same octopus, if you will. People started reading these things, and they started, including government leaders, right? Like members of Congress and members of other legislative bodies in other countries. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hold up. What's this part right here in the fine print? They started to question these things. So then it wasn't as easy to get things passed, right? So that's why they took out the more controversial aspects. It says, however, the handful of articles opened Monday were still being negotiated as a day's session was ending, with side discussion groups trying to come up with solutions. It's going as it was expected. Most member states indicated that with this new text, we are on the right track. But at the same time, there are still a lot of things that need to be addressed. Talks co-chair Roland Dries. The process is very time consuming, and time is our biggest enemy, the Dutch health diplomat said. There are outstanding issues which are complicated, but time is not our friend. Now it says here's the sting of COVID. The goal of the talks, which last 12 hours a day, and run until May 10th, which is a week from tomorrow, is to get an agreement ready for adoption at the World Health Organization's annual assembly of member states, which starts May 27th. That's end of the month. In December 2021, the raw sting of C-19, which shredded economies, crippled healthcare systems, and killed millions, motivated countries to seek a binding framework of commitments aimed at preventing another such disaster. But big differences emerged on how to go about it. The main disputes revolve around access and equity. Access to pathogens detected within countries, access to pandemic fighting products such as vaccines produced from that knowledge, and equitable distribution of not only counter pandemic tests, treatments, and vaccinations, but the means to produce them. The new draft focuses on setting up a basic framework and pushes some of the trickier details into further talks running into 2026, notably on how the planned WHO pandemic access and benefit sharing system will work in practice. Let me stop right there. Here's one thing that we know, right? There is a European proverb that says what? The devil is in the details, right? Now, if they're trying to pass something without the details being finalized, that's because the devil is in the details. I mean, there's something in those details that they want to sneak under the table so that the people don't see, because that's going to be the thing that people are going to rebel against. Peace to brother Derek, and before they straight black pride to Raw, I told Vital. My apologies that I'm not looking on the Instagram to see who has given greetings, but greetings and peace to everybody that's watching via Instagram. Now, back to the article. It says one senior figure in the negotiation said that there was a positive spirit, but that needed to be translated into concrete action. Another said that the talks were in the swing now, with movement expected Tuesday. Non-governmental organizations following the talks at WHO headquarters said it was difficult to read how they were progressing. We're witnessing a clash of narratives. We are either near the collapse or the light at the end of the tunnel. Jami Vidal, senior policy advisor at Health Action International, told AFP. I was convinced that this situation was worse than it seems, Vidal said. Discussions are taking place. That's already a step forward, but we're still missing some specific steps. We need public commitments on some of the articles. Now, here it says African unity. Now, this is interesting. Whenever you see all black nations unified, it's either a very good thing or a horrible thing. There's no in between, right? Because generally speaking, African leaders, every blue moon, they all come together and realize something needs to be done, and they unify. Or B, plan B, they come together completely wrong with believing misinformation that comes from Europeans and all head in the wrong direction like lemmings off a cliff. So let me read this. It says alongside the African group, the group for equity bloc of countries is trying to ensure developmental nations are not cut adrift again when it comes to accessing vaccines, tests, and treatments. Stop right there. Remember I told y'all about lemmings on the cliff? African leaders who are looking for people outside of Africa for assistance in these situations are absolutely headed in the wrong direction. Why would an African leader, after the things that have taken place in Africa, with Bill Gates alone, right, want to follow behind the Europeans in so-called fighting diseases based upon the Kenya situation, where the vaccine had it was limiting the women's ability to reproduce, right? You had the Sudan situation where the babies died. Like, there have been multiple situations in Africa just in the last 10 years with all types of problems with vaccines that have been given to them by Europeans. So to follow behind them instead of finding your own means of production, doing your own research, and exercising your sovereign right to come up with solutions to your own problems, I can't do nothing but shake my head, because I knew when they said that Africa was united, I already knew we was in trouble right there. Straight black pride to Danielle Davis. Now, back to the article. Says African Union health ministers released a statement Monday committing to getting legal certainty for both users and providers from the PABS system. Africa stands ready to play its part and commits to engage actively in ongoing negotiations, the minister said following the meeting in Addis Ababa. Now, Addis Ababa is in Ethiopia. Mr. Theodros from the World Health Organization, the co-president, is from Ethiopia, which means if this goes wrong, it will be Ethiopia leading the rest of Africa down the garden path to destruction. I'm not saying it is going to go wrong. I'm saying if it goes wrong, right? See, we got to call people out before we can't wait till it's too late. We got to call people out when they're doing the wrong thing before they even get started, right? So we going to name the names and point the people out just in case it goes wrong. Mr. Theodros is from Ethiopia. The African Union was meeting in Ethiopia to discuss this pandemic treaty. If this pandemic treaty limits the sovereignty of African nations and or causes Africa to receive defective medicine, we're going to be looking at Ethiopia like, you let us here, right? Let's just keep it above. And I'll be honest, I love my Ethiopian people, right? I go to their restaurants, I support their businesses. I have some brothers I know that I'm cool with. But again, if you're standing on the wrong side of history, and I'm not saying that they are, I'm saying it's very dangerous to follow behind Europeans. That's what I'm saying. This is following behind Europeans. I'm saying if we all get led down the garden path, calling you out. In fact, I'm calling you out before we even get started. Right. Now, they call for an international financing mechanism with explicit new, sustainable, and increased funding from developed nations for pandemic preparedness and response. Indonesia has been a key player in the group for equity. Wiku Adhisa Mitu, one of Indonesia's leading negotiators at the Geneva talks, said both parts of the PAP system, having quick access to detected pathogens and sharing the resulting benefits, such as vaccines, needed to be on equal footing. That's key, not only for Indonesia, but for most developing countries. Now, let's stop right here. Now, here's something that we have to understand that we don't take into account for some reason. If something is developed for Europeans, it does not mean, especially with the new technology they're using, with the a lot of new stuff is going to be based on mRNA, excuse me. Just because something works for Europeans does not mean that it will work for African people. I don't know why. I mean, these are scientists. They should know this. I don't have any idea why no one is mentioning this, and maybe they keeping it behind closed door. Again, cannot walk down the garden path to destruction here. We have to walk in with our eyes open, because the reality of the situation is the things that affect Europe do not necessarily affect Africa. If we remember clearly, Scientists in I believe it's 2021, were asking the question of why C-19 wasn't spreading and wasn't affecting the people in Africa the way it was affecting the people the rest of the world. But again, the climate in Africa is different than the rest of the world. And so there basically was no pandemic of C-19 in Africa, right? Does anybody remember that? Because I remember that clearly. I remember because I was like, why are scientists asking this question? Or why, instead of being like, wow, there's one place that hasn't been affected, they were acting as if they were frustrated that it wasn't affecting Africa, right? I don't know how many remember that, but I remember it clearly. Before they straight Black Pride to 777-9311. So again, that's why I say that the African nations have to have their eyes wide open and understand what benefits other people doesn't necessarily benefit Africa. What benefits, for example, like here, what benefits all Americans doesn't necessarily benefit Black people, right? So that's what we got to understand. Before they straight Black Pride too, you got ripped off. Who's late, extremely late, and before they on the Wake Up Radio to our wonderful producer Cindy Ashby. So I just wanted to set that up and make that clear. Now, again, I've been talking about the World Health Organization. I've been talking about the World Economic Forum. And I want you to see this clip from Klaus Schwab, because I just want to, no, I'm not going to do that one yet. No, I'm not going to do that one yet. Not yet. I want to look at a little bit of what the Heritage Foundation has to say about the pandemic treaty. Let me get that out the way, and then I'll get back to the World Economic Forum. Says despite, and this is from February, says despite multiple rounds of negotiations, the World Health Organization's latest pandemic treaty draft maintains provisions that should lead the Biden administration to oppose the adoption at the May 2024 World Health Assembly. By the way, someone remind me to cover that as it goes, even though I think this will be happening probably, if it's the last weekend, that's around the time I might be celebrating my birthday. But anyway, I'll still pay attention, I just do the videos and stuff afterwards. So it says it is incumbent upon the Biden administration to demand substantial changes to narrow the agreement and excise or modify its many remaining harmful provisions before proposing to impose it on the American people. The current proposal is a treaty requiring Senate advice and consent, as it would involve commitments affecting the nation, require implementing legislation by Congress, be permanent, and be consistent with past practice. The Senate should reject the draft if President Biden submits it without addressing its many flaws, right? Now, I'm going to tell you this. It's not a lot of times that I agree with the Heritage Foundation. It's one of those rare times. I've been telling y'all for the last couple of years, we're going to find ourselves having strange political bedfellows. We're going to find ourselves agreeing with people we don't like, agreeing on stuff that we normally wouldn't even discuss, and find ourselves aligned in opposing things that we normally wouldn't have to address. Let's be honest. If you haven't been watching my stuff on the Center or a handful of other people, you don't know anything about this. You didn't pay any attention to the global pandemic treaty. You didn't have any idea what's going on before you turned this on. Nobody's covering this stuff for Black people. Why? because it's my job apparently. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't, because brother Genie's been shut out of social media, so someone has to do the job, and it's my job. So that's why we're covering this tonight. Because somebody's gonna say, "All right, D, so you covering this, man," but get to the point. Listen, I'm moving as fast as I can for us to be able to understand clearly what's on the line. All right, now it says here the key takeaways. Even after repeated drafts to address comments and criticisms, the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty remains fatally flawed. Why? All right, let's see. It says the treaty does not focus on shortcomings revealed by C-19, such as China's refusal to allow inspection teams timely entry to its lab in Wuhan. Okay, can't argue with that part. Rather than address the failures exposed by C-19, the treaty pushes technology transfers, overrides property rights, and grants China special benefits. Now that's interesting. It says the C-19 pandemic exposed the inability of the current international health architecture led by the World Health Organization to detect and help nations to coordinate a response to such threats. In December 2021, the World Health Assembly established an intergovernmental negotiating body to draft a convention, agreement, or other international instrument under the Constitution of the World Health Organization to strengthen pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. After many meetings and several drafts, the INB released its proposed negotiating text for the pandemic agreement that will serve as the basis for government's debates and amendments before the expected adoption at the May 2024 session of the World Health Assembly. Again, this is approximately 3 weeks from now. Yet the draft treaty does little to address the shortcomings of the current international processes in responding to pandemics largely guided by the international health regulation revealed by C-19 pandemic. Specifically, the draft pandemic agreement fails to specify obligations by governments to grant immediate access to international expert teams to assess the threat of a pandemic, to provide full and timely disclosure of genomic data, and clarify steps such as trade and travel restrictions that governments can reasonably take in response to a pandemic. Instead, the bulk of the draft focuses on mandating resource transfers, weakening intellectual property rights, mandating technology sharing, pushing for redistribution of manufacturing and production, and empowering the World Health Organization. The draft does not merit U.S. support in the upcoming WHA due to its failure to address the lessons of the C-19 pandemic. Should the Biden administration sign the treaty, the Senate should withhold its advice and consent necessary for treaty ratification. Right? So they're saying that the things that we saw in 2020 and again, one thing you'll see is the Republicans are on this China thing, right? And I will say this. They're in the ballpark, right? But they're not right there. They're close, but they're not quite there. Now, what I want to do now is I want to go back. I want us to go back and remember, one, how things were, but I want to show you why I'm talking about this now, because we see that governments around the world, in essence, by discussing this treaty and try to get this framework together so that everybody can discuss it, we see that they are preparing for disease X. They are preparing for the next event. They keep calling back to, right, C-19. So since they're doing that, what I want to show you how prepared the World Economic Forum and thus the World Health Organization was for C-19 before it ever happened. Now, remember, I showed you Mr. Fauci saying in 2017 that in Trump's administration would face a what do you say, a challenge from a pandemic. Now we're gonna move up to 2019. Watch this video.
These epidemic events are getting more and more disruptive to health and to economy. And the reason we called it Event 201 is we knew eventually one of those days, one of those events would be the big one. And that big one would really challenge our capacity to respond. And to respond to the big one, we do need to have all hands on deck. Participants are confronted by a hypothetical scenario that presents to them the challenges of a response. So we will say, here's a hypothetical disease outbreak. This is the way it might be evolving. And these are some of the challenges that you'll see that you'll have to address to address the disruptions that you're seeing to your healthcare system or to your organization. All stakeholders realize pretty quickly just how underprepared we are and just how much is possible when we work together. And that the individual actions of any government or company won't add up to a proper global response. I think if we're honest with ourselves, collectively, the international community has never done enough to respond to global health security challenges. That we knew before COVID that the world was underprepared for biological risk. When we walked into the room in New York, if you would have asked, do you think the world is prepared for a pandemic? I think everyone around that table would have said no. But it's when they walked out, I think it's when we really knew that if we are going to get ready, we need to have operationalized and integrated public-private cooperation that we haven't seen before.
Now, that was from the official World Economic Forum website before the COVID pandemic occurred. They did a tabletop exercise in October of 2019 about a respiratory virus spreading around the world. 12 weeks later, the World Health Organization declared a pandemic of a respiratory virus spreading around the world. All I'm saying is they had the exercise, and then the exercise the scenario that the exercise was run to prevent, that scenario occurred less than 3 months later. That is all I'm saying. You can draw your own conclusions from there, right? Now, if they ran a tabletop exercise and then the exercise happened, that means we should pay attention if they say disease X or the next pandemic is on the way. Because history has shown us that Mr. Fauci, Mr. Schwab, and others have been incredibly prescient predicting these things, right? And nothing will make people agree faster to a health framework, a global health framework, than the next pandemic that's even worse than the current pandemic, right? Now, I have one more video to show you from Mr. Schwab. I want you to pay close attention to what he says in this video.
The first question is, Dr. Cashapp, you developed a terminology called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which became a global norm for various industrial changes. And you even chose this term as the main theme for 2016 World Economic Forum. So now, under current pandemic situation, what impact did COVID-19 have on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and how should countries or companies should respond to it?
That's an excellent question. As a reminder, my notion and my book of the Fourth Industrial Revolution is that the innovations we are seeing today in terms of artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, cloud computing, advanced robotics, and many others, together constitute a new phase in human development, on par or even exceeding previous industrial revolutions in scale and impact. COVID-19, if anything, has accelerated this ongoing industrial revolution. If COVID had happened even 10 years ago, we could not have imagined moving entire companies, schools, and government offices so fast online. Today, that is a reality. The Fourth Industrial Revolution has become a reality, not just for the pioneers, but for a broad range of people and workers. We are also seeing macroeconomic consequences, changes. Big tech companies such as Apple, Samsung, Alphabet, Amazon, or Facebook already are among the largest global companies, but the last months have further cemented their leading positions in the market, while others have started to lag further behind. That will prove to be not only the case now, but will be a permanent consequence of COVID-19. But these past few months have also shown that the Fourth Industrial Revolution will not be beneficial to all unless we make conscious choices and investments to ensure that this is the case. Disadvantaged school students, unskilled workers, and non-digitized companies and governments will feel the crisis much more than others. Moreover, both corporate and income inequality have worsened during the last months. So when we build the post-COVID world, when we do the Great Reset, one of the most important places to start will be to ensure that the fruits of the Fourth Industrial Revolutions are really shared by all. It starts with equitable investments, particularly in education and reskilling, And it also implies we come up with a new framework to regulate data, ownership, intellectual property, and competition in the fourth industrial revolution. This requires public-private cooperation. So, to the participants of this World Knowledge Forum, my message is this. It is very important to embrace the fourth industrial revolution and its technology, as it will determine our future prosperity, like nothing else.
Now, I want you to listen to what he said. One thing he said is, if you do not, whoever doesn't embrace the fourth industrial revolution will not be prosperous, right? Now, mind you, this is the person who came up with this idea and ideology. He's saying, if you don't embrace his ideas, his ideology, his philosophy, you'll be left behind. Second, go back and listen to what he said. We would not be able to have implemented the things that we need for the fourth industrial revolution if not for what? COVID-19. But we just saw that it was, again, who was it? It was the World Economic Forum who gave us the outline and did the testing for a scenario like COVID-19 with their Event 201 tabletop exercise. I'm just saying, I find it coincidental that they practice for such an event, and then such an event takes place, and then it benefits their agenda for the event that they practice benefits the agenda that they're trying to implement. I'm just saying, I find that mighty coincidental. So my point here is that if it is needed to implement further measures in furtherance of the World Economic Forum agenda, then, and we're warned about a scenario where a worse disease could come, then we might want to start getting prepared using our natural herbs and things to boost our immunity, because it's always possible. It's conceivable, at least. Y'all let me know. Is it conceivable that a similar methodology can be used in the near future in order to implement measures that people from extra governmental, what I call extra governmental forces, want to implement? If that is feasible, put a 1 in the chat. If that is absolutely ridiculous and I'm reaching so far that I'm about to pull my arm out my socket, y'all put a 2 in the chat. Now, while y'all doing that, let's get back to the article. It says the INB says cost outweighed the benefits. It says the INB has been working over the past year to draft a pandemic agreement for governments to approve now, this month, May 2024, meeting at the World Health Assembly. Successive drafts have been commented on by experts, academics, civil society groups, and governments, and the most recent draft no longer contains some of the controversial provisions that were present in the zero draft, also called the WHO CA+, released in February of 2023, such as endorsing the concept of common but differentiated responsibilities amongst nations and dictating that parties allocate domestic funding not lower than 5% of its current health expenditure to pandemic prevention, preparedness, response, and health systems recovery. And hold up, let me stop right there, because I forgot about something. Mr. Trump, Mr. Trump was talking about the United States stopping to fund the World Health Organization when he first when he first came into office. And then before he leaves, he has to deal with this situation. Just like Mr. Trump. And look, I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just saying I just thought about it. Just like, what else did he do? It was something else he said. Oh, just like Mr. Trump, right? Said NATO doesn't pay their way. America's in debt. If I become president again, we're going, I'm going to make NATO pay their way, or I might leave NATO, right? And then what happened? He says that Congress writes a law that says that he can't do that. Russia is fighting against Ukraine, and Ukraine tries to get entry into NATO, which would make the United States at war with Russia openly. Well, right now they're in a proxy war with Russia. But if you've been watching the show where we talked about, are we on the verge of World War III, you already seen all that. Now, that just came to me. Says however, objectionable provisions remain in the proposed agreement that must be clarified, limited, or removed. The treaty is also repetitive and duplicative in its provisions and sentiments. For instance, the draft has 20 separate clauses on the need to strengthen capacities of, give special considerations to, or provide targeted resources to developing countries, which include China, which doesn't make sense because China is a world power. It is not a developing country. So I agree with him on that. That doesn't make sense. After a year of negotiations, a more succinct text that expressly states the obligations of the prospective parties should be produced. A more fundamental problem is that the process has lost sight of why the negotiations started in the first place, shoring up the shortcomings of the IHR that were exposed by C-19. For instance, the zero draft required parties to facilitate WHO with rapid access to outbreak areas within the parties' jurisdictions or control, including through the deployment of rapid response and expert teams to assess and support response to emerging outbreaks. This legitimate provision was a response to China's obfuscation and delays in granting a WHO expert team access to Wuhan in the early days of the pandemic. But the latest treaty draft contains no such requirement, despite the WHO Director General pushing Beijing for full access to conduct an unfettered investigation into the origins of C-19. Nor is there any mention of consequences if a party fails to alert the international community of an outbreak or share information in a timely manner. Here's what's interesting about that. This can go two ways. It's understandable that if we're going to have this global agreement, right? And we're going to say that we're going to share information and all this and that. That means that everybody has to be required to share the information and have access and give the, in this case, the World Health Organization access. But here's my problem with that. This is a slippery slope, because once you give the World Health Organization access and all the information, what's to stop them from altering the information and blaming you for the situation, even if your country is not the country of origin? It's just my thoughts. Again, if I'm an African nation, I'm not trusting Europeans. Maybe it's ridiculous. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But all I'm saying is, if I'm Zimbabwe, for example, or if I'm some other country that I know that the global powers don't like, allowing this country to come in here and run roughshod over my healthcare system, I don't know about that part, bro. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea. But again, I'm just looking at it through a black lens, and we've had our issues with the global and the national and the local healthcare systems, regardless of where we live on planet Earth. right? Now, so this is why the Heritage Foundation has their problems. Now, here's the part that I think a lot of people will agree with. I'm just going to go past some of the other parts because we don't have all night. It says empowers the WHO. The treaty empowers the WHO in several ways. It establishes the WHO pathogen access and benefit sharing system, PAPS, to ensure rapid and timely risk assessment and facilitate rapid and timely development of and equitable access to pandemic-related products for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and responses. As part of this system, the parties are instructed to develop and use a standard material transfer agreement. Says in the event of a pandemic, real-time access by WHO to a minimum of 20%, 10% of the donation, and 10% at affordable prices to the WHO of the production of safe, efficacious, and effective pandemic-related products for distribution based on public health risks and needs, with the understanding that each party that has manufacturing facilities that produce pandemic-related products in its jurisdiction shall take all necessary steps to facilitate the export of such pandemic-related products in accordance with timetables agreed upon between WHO and manufacturer. It says failure to agree with the PAPS SMTA with the WHO is no protection, as it shall be understood that the production of pandemic-related products requiring the use of WHO PAPS materials implies the use of the WHO PAPS system, and parties are obligated to take all appropriate steps to require manufacturers to comply with that system. The agreement would also establish the WHO global supply chain and logistics networks access the demand and direct stockpiling of delivery of pandemic related products. It says, of course, implementing these new powers requires an unspecified number of new administrators and support staff. The agreement envisions a secretariat for the WHO pandemic agreement, subsidiary bodies, and expert advisory groups, all of which could amount to hundreds, if not thousands, of new international bureaucrats. Stop right here. If you're an adult in America, one thing you know is more bureaucracy is never a good idea. Okay? Whenever, this is in essence setting up a new global government of health, which every nation that signs the treaty to are then subject to the decisions of that. And because I'm answering the brother Neil's question, he's like, how is this going to be funded? Because you have to donate 10%. Let me go back and read it again, because I know I saw. No, my bad. 20%, 10% as a donation, and 10% of affordable prices of the production of safe, efficacious, and effective pandemic. So the members of this group who sign on to this treaty are going to fund this bureaucracy, right? Now, the United States government is $35 trillion in debt. I'm going to say that again. The United States is $35 trillion in debt. We've been talking about this. The government has more debt than it has tax revenue coming in. And yet, by signing on to this, you say that now you're responsible for paying for an extra governmental bureaucracy to control your healthcare responsibilities in your nation, thus taking away you're paying someone to take away some of your national sovereignty. Now, if that's a bad idea for America, which it is, then it's a horrible idea for Africa. You see what I'm saying? Because those countries can't afford to administer their health as they're struggling with their health as is, and then to have an extra governmental body come in and impose their ideas on African nations is a disaster. Right? Moreover, if an African nation, let's say, comes up with, let's say, disease X happens by whatever measure it happens, and an African nation comes up with an effective method of mitigating that disease, then instead of administering that or spreading it first to other African nations, that nation becomes bound by the treaty to spread that that effective method of mitigating the disease to everyone, even if that means to the detriment of other African people based upon the delay in them getting it, because the distribution and administration of that medicine is out of the hands of the nation that produces it and into the hands of an extra governmental body. All I'm gonna say to that is, what can go wrong? Right? So we see the stakes that are on the table with this treaty. And y'all tell me in the chat, have you heard anyone else talking about this? Has anybody on social media been talking about it? Has your local news been talking about it? Has any national news been talking about it? Y'all let me, and specifically, has anybody that generally focuses on what happens to Black people, have you seen anyone talk about this? Y'all let me know in the chat, right? Now, the politicization and failures of the WHO during the C-19 pandemic should raise fundamental questions about whether this institution should be rewarded and empowered in this manner. And now it says, incurs unspecified costs. The zero draft requires parties to commit and prioritize and increase or maintain domestic funding by allocating in its annual budgets not lower than 5% of its current health expenditure to pandemic prevention, preparedness response, and health recovery. Aside from the sovereignty concerns of removing discretionary spending from elected officials over such allocations, the cost to the U.S. would have been extensive. The language is not in the most recent draft. So at that point, it would have it says not lower than, think about it, hold up. An extrajudicial body, an extra national body, excuse me, is going to tell your government that you vote for how much to spend on healthcare and prepare for pandemics. So somebody you didn't vote for is going to tell you somebody you did vote for what they have to do. Right? It's like, think about that. You go and vote. You write your congressman and you do all that stuff. You one of those people. And then they sign this treaty. And then you go and vote and write your congressman and say, hey, man, I don't agree with this. And he say, well, I can't do nothing because we already signed the treaty. We got to give up 5% of our discretionary spending on health. Sorry. You see what I'm saying? Like, this thing is such a slippery slope that you can go right on down off the side of the mountain. Now, the next article I want to look at real quick, and I have forgot, y'all haven't even reminded me. I don't have no music playing. Y'all know how I get. Once we start getting into next article I wanted to get to real quick, I think I just wanted to show the connection because I said it, but let me just show the connection real quick. World Economic Forum and UN Science Strategic Partnership Framework. The UN Forum Partnership was signed in a meeting held at the United Nations headquarters between the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and World Economic Forum founder and executive chairman Klaus Schwab to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Stop right there. I have been talking about Agenda 2030 for a long time. To the point that at the time when I first started talking about it, it sounded like conspiracy theory. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but we're halfway through 2024. The World Economic Forum and the UN have signed a partnership. The UN and the WHO go hand in hand. Thus, the WEF, the UN, and the WHO are, in essence, three legs of the stool. They officially intertwined, even though they always been intertwined. Now they just signed the documentation. So an agreement with the World Health Organization is an agreement with the World Economic Forum, is an agreement with the United Nations, which means if you sign over some of your sovereignty via the WHO treaty, you've signed it over to the UN and the World Economic Forum, because they all go hand in hand. And if you've been following me, then you understand who is behind. Oh, you said it's too loud? All right, I got you. Hold on. If you've been following me for a long time, you understand who is behind the World Economic Forum, who Klaus Schwab is who was his mentor, right? And if you don't know, I suggest you go to the other videos, right? Now, it says the partnership identifies 6 areas of focus: financing the 2030 agenda, climate change, health, digital cooperation, gender equality and empowerment of women, education and skills, to strengthen and broaden the combined impact by building on existing and new collaborations. The full partnership framework can be found here. Let me say something. Whenever you hear the words public-private partnership, framework, and stakeholders, if you find your local politician using these words, that person is under the influence and or control of the World Economic Forum. And the reason I say that is because Klaus Schwab is the one that put these words into the lexicon. I remember I was sitting here, I was one day a while back, and the mayor of DC was talking. I don't even remember what she was talking about. And I was about to turn it off because I didn't want to hear what she had to say. And next thing I know, she said public-private partnership and stakeholders. And my ears perked up and I'm like, oh, okay. You are in bed with these folks. I'm not imagining things. So, if you turn on your local news and your mayor or somebody starts using these words, they've had some WEF training. You may not know, but that's a dead giveaway. BB48 to brother Tony Camp. Now, the interesting thing about this is that, again, this is from the World Economic Forum website. This is from June 2019. So this partnership was set up just in time for 2020. It says the World Economic Forum and United Nations signed today a strategic partnership framework outlining areas of cooperation to deepen institutional engagement and jointly accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The framework was drafted based on mapping of existing collaboration between the two institutions and will enable a more strategic and coordinated approach towards delivering impact. The UN Foreign Partnership was signed in a meeting held at the United Nations headquarters between UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and World Economic Forum founder and executive chairman Klaus Schwab. All right, there's a meeting. I guess that's Mr. Gutierrez. Yeah, that must be Mr. Gutierrez there. And Mr. Schwab. Not sure who the gentleman and lady are on each side of that. Says the new strategic partnership framework between the United Nations and the World Economic Forum has great potential to advance our efforts on key global challenges and opportunities, from climate change, health and education, to gender equality, digital cooperation, and financing of sustainable development. Rooted in UN norms and values, the framework underscores the invaluable role of private sector in this work and points the way towards action to generate shared prosperity on a healthy planet, right? While leaving no one behind. They always put the leaving no one behind part in there. And you always hear Klaus Schwab saying, oh, but we can't leave behind the little people, and we must have equity in this and this and that. And yet, while he says that, he admits that big corporations are getting bigger, smaller corporations are being swallowed up and destroyed, rich people are getting richer, and regular people are getting poorer, all while following these policies and frameworks that he has helped set up, right? I mean, man, you just got to listen to the Orwellian doublespeak when he talks. Now, that is that. That partnership was signed. Now, we're going to go again to the World Economic Forum. Go back to the Disease X thing. It says Disease X, this is how we should prepare for the next big virus. This was almost a year ago now. So let's go through this a little bit and see what it said. Now, this is so interesting. What did this say? It says, help us prevent the spread of disinformation. I'm going to stop right here. I want to say this. When I finished editing the lectures that I did, his brother, you got ripped off. You still in here? Let the people know. Because these have been taken off of YouTube, even though they were private. Were the C19 lectures that were done after the pandemic started, were they worth people's time and money? You just let the people know that, because I am going to edit those. It was 2 parts, and I only got through halfway of the book, right? It was a presentation on the book. I am going to send those out. I'm gonna make those available. I will let you all know when I'm finished. When I finish editing them. And I'm going to give a money back guarantee if you don't learn anything from that. And some of the information that's in here is in there. But again, this is 3 years after the fact. You don't learn anything from that. If you send me some money, I'll send it back to you. Right? That's how much value I think is found in those. That's all I'm gonna say. And the reason I came up is because when they talk about disinformation, that was one of the key points that they discussed. Now, it says the world needs to be better prepared for a future pandemic. Kate Kellen for the Coalition of Epidemic Preparedness Innovation tells Radio Davos. By mapping viruses with the potential to become the next pandemic, the global health community and governments can be more responsive the next time. It says global collaboration and adequate funding are needed to improve pandemic preparedness. Let's get into the article. Says you can get a long way towards being able to produce something that will target a novel virus before the virus even emerges. This is how Kate Kellen describes the sleuthing work needed to prevent another pandemic on the scale and impact of COVID-19. To Robin Pomeroy on the World Economic Forum's Radio Davos podcast. I'm gonna make sure I start listening more into that because I'm sure more stuff will be revealed. Anyway, a former global health correspondent at Reuters, she is now chief scientific writer at the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CEPI, and author of the book Disease X, the 100 Days Mission to End Pandemics. CEPI is a non-profit organization that funds research and development of vaccines against diseases that could potentially become epidemics or pandemics. With the World Economic Forum as one of the founding members, CEPI seed-funded 3 successful COVID vaccines, including the widely known Astrazeneca and Moderna injections. Stop right there. Right? So, CEPI helped fund and research these vaccines, and CEPI got its money from the World Economic Forum. So the World Economic Forum helped fund these vaccines, which they say are successful. The organization also works on a range of diseases. And let's start right here, right? Because they mentioned AstraZeneca and Moderna. Hey, thank you for mentioning that. Let us go down here. This is from August 29th. AstraZeneca cops to rare deadly side effects of COVID jab as lawsuits mount. Right? I'm not making this stuff up. AstraZeneca has admitted that its COVID-19 vaccine could cause a rare but deadly blood clotting condition, potentially exposing the UK pharmaceutical giant to tens of millions of dollars in lawsuits. Tens of millions of pounds in lawsuits brought by loved ones of those injured or killed as a result of the jab. I'm gonna say that last part again. Wait, what? Brought by loved ones of those injured or killed as a result of the jab. Again, this is not me. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the New York Post. Lawyers representing dozens of class action claimants say that some of their clients' cases could be worth as much as $25 million, calling the Cambridge headquarters pharma firm's vaccine a defective product, according to the Daily Mail. AstraZeneca, which is contesting the claims, acknowledged in a February legal document that its vaccine can, in very rare cases, cause a condition called thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, or TTS. One thing I noticed is that healthcare professionals are very much like lawyers. They like using long words that you can't pronounce so that you sound like an idiot while they try to pull a flim-flam on you. But let us continue. Says one of the claimants is Jamie Scott on the right, an IT engineer and father of 2, left with a permanent brain injury resulting from a blood clot after he received the vaccine in 2021. All right, let's stop right here. I'm going to ask y'all, in 2021, did anybody other than possibly Brother Genie with any known news agency, any known website, was anyone saying that there was a possibility of this type of injury that you could die from based upon these jabs that we were receiving? Now, this is AstraZeneca. This was apparently mostly in Europe, and this is focused on the UK. But I'm just saying, if they're having this problem could be elsewhere, right? Now, PTS can cause patients to suffer blood clots as well as low blood platelet count, which in some cases have seriously harmed or even killed recipients of the company's vaccine. A few years ago, this was conspiracy theory. Now they have admitted it. So far, 51 cases have been filed in London's High Court, estimated to be worth around a total of $125 million. And let's be honest, we know how these things work. When people see other people in a lawsuit, they realize, oh, you know what? My cousin, aunt, brother, sister, wife, daughter, son, etc. also exhibit some of these symptoms. Maybe I should investigate this. Due to a bargain Astrazeneca struck with the UK government at the height of the pandemic to indemnify the drug maker, right, against potential lawsuits, taxpayers will be on the hook for any payouts resulting from the claims. One of the claimants who filed the suit is Jamie Scott, the father of two, left with a permanent brain injury. Now let's stop right here. Let me ask y'all a question. If I am sure that I have thoroughly tested my product, I am sure that it is not only effective but safe. So, okay, that was strange. That is not only effective but safe. If I'm sure of that, why have I made the government sign a clause to indemnify me against lawsuits? Take all the time that you need to process the information that I have just delivered. Allegedly, this is safe. I have tested it. I know it is safe. I know it is effective. I know there will be no problem. But just in case, if there are lawsuits, I'm going to make sure that it's not me that have to pay them. You have to pay them through the government. Why would any government institution on earth sign such an agreement with a major corporation? That doesn't make any sense. So if the thing doesn't work, or more importantly, if it kills people, it's not the company that has to pay for making a defective product. It's the government that has to pay for making the defective product, and which means, in essence, it's the people who were literally, in essence, forced to take the product, have to pay the people that were harmed by the product. Man, what kind of flim-flam is that? Let us read. His wife, Kate, told the outlet she was hopeful the company's admission will accelerate the outcome of the case. We need an apology, fair compensation to our family and other families who have been affected. We have the truth on our side, and we are not going to give up. Excuse me. In that statement, AstraZeneca expressed sympathy for anyone who was, see the keyword allegedly here, who was allegedly harmed by the vaccine, but defended it as a net positive, pointing out that complications are exceedingly rare, at least as far as they've admitted. Patient safety is our highest priority, and regulatory authorities have clear and stringent standards to ensure that safe use of all medicines, including vaccines. Read the statement in part. From the body of evidence in clinical trials and real-world data, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine was continuously been shown to have an acceptable safety profile. According to whom? It's acceptable unless you're the person with the brain injury. Then I don't think that's acceptable. if you're that person. But hey, be it for me. An acceptable safety profile and regulators around the world consistently state that the benefits of vaccination outweigh the risk of extremely rare potential side effects. Now let's stop right here. We're not talking about, the discussion is not about vaccines in general. The discussion is about the specific vaccine, in this case, that people were in essence forced to take. We're not talking about stuff that people take voluntarily or, was recommended. People were in essence forced to take this. And now people are suffering side effects, including death. The Astrazeneca COVID vaccine was first approved for emergency use in December 2020. Of the 50 million doses administered in the UK during the crisis, 81 people have developed blood clots potentially linked to the jab, according to the health data compiled by the UK pharmaceutical watchdog, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. Right? That seems like a minuscule number, and maybe it is. Unless you're the person that's dying, then it's not a minuscule number, right? Now, so we see the connection between the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and these corporations that produce this vaccine, which some people have had adverse reactions to, and suffered greatly from, right? Now, let's go back here where they talk about being prepared. Says it's talking about disease X, going back to the World Economic Forum site. Says it's a virus that we don't know yet. But what we do know is out there. We do know that the potential to spill over from an animal population, potentially into humans, perhaps mutate or adapt itself, and then begin spreading and killing people. Now, I'm going to show you a video that explains how they know that there's a potential for this to occur. That's all I'm gonna say. After I show the video, then we can discuss this. Now, this video is long, it's about 5 minutes long, but there's a lot of information in here, and I don't think that I have publicly shown this video before. So I'm gonna pause the music, and I just want you all to check this out, and then we'll discuss it.
Are supercharged lab-enhanced viruses becoming a global threat?
Gain-of-function research?
Gain-of-function.
So-called gain-of-function research,
known as gain-of-function.
The controversy around so-called gain-of-function research has erupted alongside the heated debate around the coronavirus pandemic's origin.
It's a tale of two theories. A lot of Democrats poo-pooed the whole idea of the lab leak.
Prominent public health experts saying that the lab leak theory, which was previously hawked by conspiracy theorists, might actually be credible.
This has moved high-risk gain-of-function research from the secretive shadows into the public spotlight. We've set out to investigate why, how, and where this type of research is being done, and what the risks and benefits are.
So what exactly is gain-of-function? It is a type of research that makes pathogens like viruses deadlier or more infectious to humans. The researchers intentionally modify the virus in lab experiments to give it new functions. For instance, the ability to spread by air or attack human nerve cells. Gain-of-function research seeks to make a virus more easily transmissible between humans, to increase the severity of the disease it triggers, or to make it resistant to existing treatments or vaccines. Sounds crazy?
Two main reasons are given for why this type of research is done. One is to better predict which viruses in animal populations might one day naturally mutate and become infectious for humans. The second is to be better prepared when a new pandemic hits, for instance by already developing a vaccine for it preemptively.
There are obviously valid reasons for gain-of-function research, and the main reason is to understand pathogens better, to understand the way they transmit and behave, and thereby to make vaccines, drugs, etc.
So how many vaccines have been developed as a result of gain-of-function research?
None. There have been no preemptive vaccines to date.
Have any pandemics been prevented thanks to gain-of-function research?
The answer is not that I know of.
Not that I'm aware.
What's clear is that it didn't prevent this coronavirus pandemic.
Actually, none of the gain-of-function research that was done over the past decades or whatever, none of it contributed to finding a vaccine or cure for SARS-CoV-2, for COVID-19. But in the future, there could be potential for that.
Some scientists think this is a perfectly legitimate endeavor. Others say it's akin to checking for a gas leak by holding a match to the gas pipe. In the effort to protect us from a pandemic, scientists could cause a pandemic.
So let's look a bit more closely at how gain-of-function research is done. One method is to genetically re-engineer pathogens by inserting genes from one virus into another to make it more aggressive.
Another, simpler method is called animal passaging. Researchers inject a virus into ferrets or so-called humanized mice. These mice have been genetically manipulated to have human lung receptors. The virus undergoes slight mutations as it passes through several generations of mice. The scientists select the strongest mutations until the virus eventually becomes transmissible to humans.
The scientific technology today is so good that you can make a whole genome of a virus with no scars, no seams or anything. It looks perfectly natural.
In 2011, an extreme gain-of-function experiment rocked the science world. Scientists used the serial passaging method to make the H5N1 avian flu virus more transmissible to humans. The lead scientist, Ron Fouchier, claimed he created one of the most dangerous viruses you can make.
They had taken a virus that was deadly but not good at infecting humans and made it also very infectious. So that kind of research, I think, is the risks are immensely high. If it broke out, there would be just widespread death. But the benefits, what are they? Many scientists look at this experiment and they think, why? Why did you do this?
The thing with the avian flu is that it is extremely deadly, with an infection fatality rate of approximately 60%. Compare that to a rate of under 1% for COVID-19. Luckily, this virus hasn't leaked from a lab so far. But another worry is that a man-made virus like this one could end up in the wrong hands.
The main concern was the publication of the research, because once you publish it, then nefarious actors can also have access. It's like if you publish a method on the internet on how to hack a bank account, do you think someone's going to use it? Of course they're going to use it, right? And several, terrorist groups have made their intention to use biological warfare known.
High-security BSL-4 labs built for research on highly infectious pathogens are booming around the world, and 3/4 of them are located in densely populated urban areas. Gain-of-function research is being conducted in some of these labs in the US, China, Europe, and other countries, although nobody knows for sure in how many of them. But surprisingly, gain-of-function experiments are not done exclusively in highest-security BSL-4 labs. Some are done in level 2 and 3 labs.
We recently found out that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was doing a lot of this SARS-like virus research at a very low biosafety level. So at a level that you would feel unsafe working with airborne viruses. At BSL-2, you may or may not be wearing a lab coat. You definitely should be wearing gloves, but normally you don't wear a mask at BSL-2. So if you're working with airborne viruses, live viruses at BSL-2, viruses that can spread through the air, like SARS-CoV-2, then you are completely exposed. It was not an appropriate biosafety level for working with these SARS-like viruses.
Now, the Asian scientist said that she almost said, without saying it, that, because again, there's still discussion on the origin of the C19 virus. She almost said, without saying it, two things. She said, one, you can make a man-made, the technology has advanced to the point where you can make a man-made virus appear natural because you can put it together without scars. The second thing she said is that in Wuhan, they were working with things that can easily escape because they were at a level facility lower than the highest security level facility. The discussion of whether or not this stuff came from the Wuhan lab is still up for debate. Did that make you feel any more secure that it did not come from this place and was naturally occurring, or that this documentation from these scientists make you think that there's a higher probability that it did in fact occur and is indeed not naturally occurring because they have the technology to make it look like it was naturally occurring? Y'all answer me in the chat. Now, I'm going to wrap this up with one more article because they said that these types of labs are in around the country, around the world, in America and in Europe. Why is that important? Because let's go back to something that we all forgot about. It's something I've been talking about for a while. Let's go back. After months of denial, U.S. admits to running Ukraine biolabs. Washington has been urged to come clean over its biolab program in the Ukraine after the Department of Defense admitted its existence. The Pentagon said on Thursday that it's operated 46 biolabs in Ukraine, handling dangerous pathogens after previously dismissing the claims as Russian propaganda. China has joined now look at China now. China has joined calls for the United States to explain the role and capacity of the laboratories following the Pentagon's stunning reversal after months of denial, aka lying, months of lying. In March, leaked papers appeared to suggest that its operations in Ukraine were sensitive, while Kiev was reportedly blocked from public disclosure of the program. Now, why is this important? Because this is from June 2022. Why is this important? This is important because this is the reason why Vladimir Putin invaded the Ukraine, because he said that Hillary Clinton had authorized biological weapons labs on his doorstep in Ukraine, and that he was going in there to stop them from manufacturing whatever they were manufacturing. And he said that they were using Russian DNA to come up with whatever they were trying to come up with. And so he said he's going into Ukraine to stop it. Mind you, right? Your money is going to the Ukraine to stop Russia from finding these biological labs and expose whatever is going there, because they just sent billions of dollars, as I talked about on one of my shows, one of my live streams last month. And you're trying to figure out what in the world this is about. This war is about stopping biological warfare being waged by the U.S. through Ukraine against Russia. And as I told you all before, as I showed you, who is Russia's biggest enemy according to themselves? It's not even the United States, although the United States are about Russia all the time, but it's who? Israel. Israel also have their hands in this, but I can't even talk about that here. I'll just send out the information to whoever wants it at a later date. So now we see the connection between this pandemic treaty, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, United Nations, NATO, the war in Ukraine, and your tax dollars funding all of these shenanigans while people work on the next biological agent that may be released accidentally or not so much, that could cause destruction of lives and kill millions, and at worst case scenario, billions of people. And there is virtually no one in the Black community talking about this. And so that's why I had to put this on the table. And in reality, this is an introductory discussion, but we're at the 2-hour mark. But I just want to show that all these different things are interconnected and that all of these things are in play right now. And your tax dollars is helping to possibly fund your own destruction. Right? Here's the good news. The good news is there is a chance to stop the adoption of the WHO treaty in its tracks right now, but time is short because they're going to be voting on it in 3 weeks. I have provided you with the information. If you value this information, I would just say it like this. If you have learned anything and if you found any value in this information, the Cash App is $DC Radical 1. If there is nowhere else that you could get this information to, I don't care if you donate $1 a piece, since Anina has already donated, right? Because I'm gonna tell you right now, this is probably going to stay up 24 hours, and I'm probably going to take it down and move it over to OTW2. You can follow me at OTW2 at DC Radical 1, all one word, because there's no way in the world that YouTube is going to allow this to stay up, right? This level of information and this type of information isn't allowed to stay up here. But I'm going to make sure that you have access to it through other means, because I think it's that valuable and that important that we pay attention to these things that you're not going to hear on your local news. You're not going to hear on your local radio. You're not going to hear from too many people on social media, because generally speaking, YouTube doesn't allow you to even mention C19. Every video that I have had taken down, and it's probably half a dozen or more, has been taken down for discussing C19. And you want to know who made the framework for what you can and cannot discuss and what is considered misinformation and is not considered misinformation? The World Health Organization. They set the parameters for that. You want to know who they got the parameters from? They got the parameters from the World Economic Forum. I've seen the documents. I documented it. I put it out. So I already know where this is going. It's going right to the delete bin as soon as they get a chance to get to it. I'll be downloading this as soon as I stop recording. So, brothers and sisters, I thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you find value in this, you can donate via Cash App, $DC Radical 1. Those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can follow me on Instagram at DC.radical1, at Twitter at DC Radical _ONE. The OTW2, you can follow me there at DC Radical 1, one word. You can donate via Cash App, $DC Radical 1. And you can email me at dc.radical_1 at protonmail.com. I appreciate you all for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I would like to thank everyone that has subscribed. The subscriber counts have gone up. And y'all know my motto. The motto is simple. Get fully monetized get deleted trying. That's our motto. If you're on the Instagram side and you haven't followed the DC Radical 1 YouTube page, please do me a solid and do that, because we are now less than 200 away from full YouTube monetization. And that's the goal, to have the channel pay for itself. So again, brothers and sisters, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for your support. I'm your brother DC Radical 1. And with that, I say a BB for ODA and straight black pride. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also follow us on our other social media platforms. On Instagram, we're at dc.radical1. On Twitter, we're at dc_radical_ONE. And the Cash App is $DC Radical 1. Again, thank you for subscribing. A BB for ODA and straight black pride.